Since 2017, the belief that aliens and UFOs are real has become increasingly popular. So are aliens and UFOs real? And does the Bible have anything to say about it? If extraterrestrials from a distant star system visited Earth, it would surely be mentioned in Bible prophecy. But the Bible says absolutely nothing about extraterrestrials visiting Earth. The only invasion of Earth from the skies is the second coming of Christ, and the angels following Christ are obviously not extraterrestrials. That leaves two possibilities. Number one, either the alleged aliens and UFOs are simply not real, or number two, they are indeed real, but they are not extraterrestrials, but something else. Does Christ mention UFOs? While the Bible does not specifically mention UFOs and aliens, Christ may have referred to UFOs when the disciples asked him to expound on what would take place prior to his return. One of the things that would take place prior to Christ's return would be fearful sights in the sky, and we quote from the Gospel of Luke, "And great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines, and pestilences, and fearful sights, and great signs shall there be from heaven," unquote. Luke chapter 21, verse 11. Fearful sights is translated from the Greek word phobetron, Strong's number 5400. The Gospel of Luke chapter 21, verse 11 is the only place in the Bible where phobetron is used. So what are these phobetrons that Christ referred to? Could they be UFOs and their evil pilots? And by the way, in recent years, the term UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena, has become more popular than the term UFO, unidentified flying object. But in this video, we will simply use UFO for both of them. Prior to 2017, so-called aliens and UFOs were generally believed to be extraterrestrials. But since 2017, most ufologists now believe that they are interdimensional beings. If you do not take the Bible into account, it is close to impossible to know what is fact and what is fiction concerning aliens and UFOs. Everyone in the world of ufology agrees that the subject is full of misinformation and disinformation. And to define what misinformation and disinformation are, we can quote from the Encyclopedia Britannica. Misinformation is the inadvertent spread of false information without intent to harm, while disinformation is false information designed to mislead others and is deliberately spread with the intent to confuse fact and fiction. But if you know that the Bible is the Word of God and compare the popular stories in ufology with the Bible, you are able to get a much better idea what the so-called aliens and UFOs are. The Bible does not mention extraterrestrials, but does it mention interdimensional beings? It certainly does. But in the Bible, they are called angels. There are two groups of angels. Number one, the angels that are loyal to the Creator, the God of Israel, and number two, the fallen angels that followed Satan in his rebellion. Both the angels that are loyal to God and the fallen angels can take on the appearance of men. For example, in Genesis chapters 18 and 19, we read that God sent two angels to Sodom to see if the inhabitants of Sodom were as wicked as God had heard, and to rescue Lot and anyone else that were righteous. The two angels looked like men because the Sodomites thought the two angels were handsome men and wanted to have sex with them. Fallen angels can also take on physical appearance. In Genesis chapter 6, we read that the fallen angels took on physical bodies and married as many daughters of Adam and Eve as they wanted, and produced half-human, half-angelic offspring with them, the Nephilim. The Nephilim were mighty men, men of renown, and were one of the primary reasons why God sent the flood to destroy almost all of mankind and the Nephilim. The Nephilim are mentioned in many traditions. For example, in Greek mythology, Hercules was the offspring of Zeus and an earthly woman. In this video, we're going to show that the alleged aliens, or so-called aliens and UFOs have all the characteristics of the fallen angels of old, and that they indeed are fallen angels and not extraterrestrials from a distant star system. We will begin by looking at the historical connections between occultists and Satanists and the alleged so-called aliens and UFOs, and then take a look at the similarities between the fallen angels and demons of the Bible and the recent so-called aliens and UFOs. Aleister Crowley, who lived 1875 to 1947, was one of the most infamous occultists and Satanists ever. He was born in England in 1875 and started the Satanist religion Thelema. Aleister Crowley's influence has been widespread. Among the rock musicians who have paid homage to him in their music are the Beatles, who put Aleister Crowley's image on their Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album from 1967, and Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, who bought Aleister Crowley's haunted mansion in Scotland, and Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath, and Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden, and David Bowie and The Doors and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Aleister Crowley also took over the semi-secret occult order Ordo Templi Orientis, also known as OTO. From January to March 1918, while living in New York, Aleister Crowley began a series of magical workings called the Amalantrah working, along with his partner, the medium Roddy Minor. The purpose of these magical workings was to invoke spiritual entities in order to make them manifest themselves in the physical world. Crowley succeeded in making at least one spiritual being take on physical appearance. This being called itself Lamb, or was so called by Crowley, and Crowley drew a portrait of the creature Lamb. You see it on the right here, next to himself. It has been recognized by many, both occultists and Christians, that Crowley's portrait of the creature Lamb has a striking similarity to the alleged aliens referred to as the Little Greys. For example, Kenneth Grant, who was considered to be Crowley's heir of the OTO, wrote, "Lamb is a great old one whose archetype is recognizable in accounts of UFO occupants." In occult circles, it is generally agreed that Crowley opened a portal to the spiritual realm through his Amalantrah working. Furthermore, the same occult circles also view Lamb as a class of spiritual beings and not an individual spirit. Crowley used the Enochian call in the Amalantrah working. The Enochian call was devised by John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I's astrologer and advisor. When John Dee used the same Enochian call in the 1600s, he encountered little men who moved about in a little fiery cloud. Is that a coincidence? Hardly. Jack Parsons and the Babylon working. The portal to the spiritual realm that Crowley had opened in 1918 was further enlarged in 1946 when Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard performed a series of rituals in the Mojave Desert in California called the Babylon Working between the 4th and the 5th of January 1946. Jack Parsons, who lived 1914 to 1952, had been made president of the Agave Lodge of the OTO in California by Crowley himself. Besides being a prominent occultist, Parsons was also a famous rocket fuel scientist and founder of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Parsons was so important for NASA that they would probably not have been able to put a man on the moon in 1969 if it had not been for Parsons' work. Later in 1946, L. Ron Hubbard left Parsons along with Parsons' girlfriend and Parsons' life savings. In 1952, L. Ron Hubbard founded the Church of Scientology. Parsons and Hubbard's Babylon working were based on the same Enochian ceremonial sex magic which Crowley had used in his Amalantra working, and the purpose was to bring forth a moonchild. A moonchild is a child born in a satanic ritual where a demon takes possession of the body of the newborn child. Parsons and Hubbard sought to make Babylon, the great harlot of the Book of Revelation, take possession of a literal newborn child, hence the name Babylon working. During the rituals, a spirit did appear and told Parsons that it was the great goddess, the divine feminine, and specifically identified itself as Hathor by the words, "Hathor am I, and to my beauty drawn, all glories of the universe bow down." Hathor was one of the major Egyptian goddesses. Remember this name Hathor because it will come up later in this video series, in the next video. Crowley thought Parsons and Hubbard had performed their rituals in an unprofessional manner, and from the diaries of the participants, it is clear that they believed they had enlarged the spiritual portal that Crowley had opened. Parsons had proudly proclaimed that UFOs would, we quote, play a part in converting the world to Crowleyanity, unquote. A little more than a year after Parsons' Babylon working, the modern UFO era began on the 24th of June 1947, when the American businessman and pilot Kenneth Arnold from his airplane saw 9 UFOs over the Cascade Mountains in Washington state. 2 weeks later, in the beginning of July 1947, a UFO allegedly crashed in Roswell, New Mexico. The modern UFO era had begun. Jack Parsons died in an accident on the 17th of June 1952. Only a month later, from 19th to the 27th of July 1952, the until then largest UFO sightings took place during the so-called invasion of Washington, where a large number of UFOs flew over Washington, D.C., including across the White House and the Capitol building. The U.S. Air Force launched numerous F-94 fighter jets in order to intercept the UFOs, but the UFOs flew away with incredible speed. This incident caused widespread panic and media frenzy and an official investigation by the U.S. Air Force. And now we're going to change the subject just for 1 minute. My field of expertise is actually something completely different than aliens and UFOs, and that is the subject of the lost tribes of Israel. So if you are interested in the subject of the lost tribes of Israel, I recommend that you buy my book, The Lost 10 Tribes of Israel in Europe. It is 353 pages long, and you can buy it on Amazon. And the price for the paperback version is $10, and for the hardcover version $17. And you can also get it as a Kindle ebook for only $2. And as I mentioned, you can buy it on Amazon. So now we're going to get back to the subject of aliens and UFOs. UFOs and nuclear bombs. The first nuclear bomb was detonated when the United States tested a nuclear device at the Trinity test site in New Mexico on the 16th of July 1945. The first time a nuclear bomb was used in a military operation was when the US nuked the city of Hiroshima on the 6th of August 1945. In the world of ufology, a recurring theme is that UFOs are inordinately attracted to sites where nuclear bombs are deployed. The noted American researcher into the subject of UFOs and nuclear bombs, Robert Hastings, has interviewed hundreds of people working at American nuclear sites and has documented that UFOs have appeared over more than 150 American nuclear bomb sites and Soviet nuclear bomb sites as well, and have in several instances deactivated the nuclear bombs of the greatest military power of planet Earth, the United States of America. Robert Hastings has shown This in his books such as UFOs and Nukes from 2017, and on his website, and in lectures at Oxford University and at an event at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. in 2010. The inordinate interest that UFOs seem to have in nuclear bombs will be relevant to the conclusion of this video series, so please do keep this point in mind. That's what we're going to get back to in the next video. Nazi Germany allegedly developed a UFO, but they never successfully mastered anti-gravity. A UFO supposedly crashed in Magenta, a town outside Milan, Italy, on the 13th of June 1933. Benito Mussolini forbade any public mentioning of the crash, and the Italian fascists and the German Nazis worked on the UFO in order to use its technology. Another UFO allegedly crashed in the Black Forest of southern Germany in 1936, but again no proof has ever been produced for this claim. This supposedly led to the development of the so-called Nazi Bell, which is said to have been an early version of a man-made reverse-engineered UFO. What is known is that Nazi Germany in the latter years of the Second World War produced many weapon systems that were considerably superior to those of the Allies. The most famous were the V-1 and the V-2 rockets. The V-2 was the first ballistic missile in the world. The Messerschmitt 262, the world's first mass-produced jet fighter. It flew more than 100 miles per hour faster than the Allied fighters. The Messerschmitt 262 was operational in April 1944, and a total of 1,430 were produced. The Messerschmitt 163 Comet, the world's first and only rocket-powered interceptor. The Messerschmitt 163 became operational in 1944, and a total of 370 entered service. And the Horten 229, a partially stealth-flying wing jet fighter bomber, eerily similar to the much later American flying wing stealth aircrafts, the F-117, which became operational in 1983, and the B-2 bomber, which became operational in 1997. The B-2s were also the ones that the US Air Force used to bomb Iran recently. After the end of World War II, 1,600 German scientists that had worked on aircraft, rockets and missiles were secretly brought into the United States under Operation Paperclip. The most famous of them was Wernher von Braun, who headed the US space program in Huntsville, Alabama, and led the team that developed the Saturn V rockets that brought the first man to the moon in 1969. He is known as the father of the American lunar program. During the last years of his life, Wernher von Braun was sick and hired Carol Rosin, a respected space and missile defense consultant, as his spokeswoman. Carol Rosin told that Wernher von Braun told her over and over that the last card the military-industrial complex would play would be the threat of an alien invasion. And we quote from Carol Rosin's testimony to Dr. Stephen Greer. I met the late Dr. Wernher von Braun in early '74, she told Greer. At that time, von Braun was dying of cancer, but he assured me that he would live a few more years in order to tell me about the game that was being played. That game being the effort to weaponize space, to control Earth from space and space itself. He asked me to be his spokesperson, to appear on occasions when he was too ill to speak, and I did. And what he asked me to do was to educate decision makers and the public about why we shouldn't be putting weapons into space and what the alternatives are, how we could be building a cooperative space system. What was most interesting to me was a repetitive sentence that he said to me over and over again. And that was the strategy that was being used to educate the public and decision makers, and the scare tactics, the spin that was being put on the weapon systems, and that was how we identify an enemy. The enemy at first, he said, the enemy against whom we're going to build a space-based weapon system. First, the Russians are going to be considered the enemy, then terrorists would be identified, and that was soon to follow. Then we were going to identify third world crazies. We now call them nations of concern. The next enemy was asteroids, and against asteroids we're going to build space-based weapons. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to build space-based weapons against aliens. And all of it, he said, is a lie. Unquote. Like most other stories in the world of ufology, the Nazi UFO connection is sorely lacking any proof. However, if the alleged aliens are in fact fallen angels, it would be reasonable if they gave angelic technology to the Nazis, since they were just as evil as the fallen angels themselves. John D'Souza is a retired FBI special agent who worked counterterrorism and paranormal cases for over 25 years. He was also an attorney and maintained a top-secret security clearance during his time in the US government. During his time in the FBI, John D'Souza worked with paranormal cases. Some of his files were used by the film director Chris Carter to make the first season of the highly popular TV series The X-Files. John D'Souza's superiors in the FBI interrogated both John D'Souza and Chris Carter over the use of secret FBI files, but decided to let them both go free as long as Chris Carter would no longer use John D'Souza as a source. John D'Souza is today a born-again Christian and a prolific writer and speaker on the subject of aliens and UFOs. No one has ever tried to debunk D'Souza's story about his FBI background, as far as I know at least. According to John D'Souza, the so-called aliens are in fact extra-dimensional beings created by demons, while most of the UFOs that have been observed are man-made reverse-engineered UFOs made by what he calls the Cabal. The Cabal have made a quid pro quo agreement with the demon aliens that the demons give the Cabal advanced technology such as UFOs. In exchange, the Cabal let the demonic aliens abduct human beings for some sort of breeding program. D'Souza is of the belief that the Cabal are going to use their armada of reverse-engineered UFOs to launch a worldwide false flag alien invasion similar to the blockbuster movie Independence Day from 1996 and defeat their own UFOs and install themselves as the rulers of a totalitarian one-world government. So this is the end of part 1 of Return of the Fallen Angels, where we have taken a look at the history of the so-called aliens and UFOs. And in the next video, part 2 of Return of the Fallen Angels, we're going to take a look at the spiritual aspects of the so-called aliens and UFOs and compare them with the fallen angels of the Bible and see just how similar they are.